Hi, thanks for joining me in this video. I'm Jeff Fudge. I'm the instructor for this course, or this video, I should say. You can see a little bit about me and my background here, but let's face it, you're not here to learn about me. You're here to learn about the cloud and AWS. So thanks for joining me on this journey to learning all about AWS. This is the first of many videos that I'm going to produce, so let's go.
AWS, also known as Amazon Web Services, is the world's largest cloud computing platform. And I say large because they have millions of customers and they bring in about $74 billion a year. I think that qualifies as big. And ironically, AWS was born out of Amazon's own IT division. So in 2000, Amazon was working on Merchant.com, a website for other retailers to sell their own merchandise, and they were experiencing engineering delays. It wasn't the developers weren't writing code fast enough, it's that the developers were waiting to get the infrastructure given to them, additional servers, additional storage, some networking needs. And that's when a light bulb went off, and Amazon figured, hey, if we have this issue, we're sure other companies are going to have this same issue, and maybe this is something we need to take to market. Then in 2006, AWS launched the first commercial cloud computing services. So they were first to market, which is a big reason why they are the market leader in terms of cloud computing platforms. But 2006, they had just two services. One was for storage and one was for compute, with compute being equal to virtual servers. By 2009, AWS opened up a second region, so a second data center, and they were up to 10 different services. In 2015, AWS was offering 50 different cloud computing services to customers. And if you fast forward to today, AWS is now offering over 200 different services. Now I want to talk about four of the characteristics of cloud computing. The first is that resources are available on demand. And this is very different than when you need to purchase hardware or other infrastructure services for your on-prem or co-located equipment. These are readily available. When you need them, you can get them quickly, and when you no longer need them, you can go ahead and deprovision them or delete them. The second characteristic of cloud computing is that these resources are available via the internet. No special circuits are needed. As long as you have access to the internet, you have access to the cloud computing services. Next is the ability to pay for only what you use, and often this is called pay-as-you-go. So as you provision resources, you will start being billed for those, and when you stop using those, then you are no longer being billed. And this is one of the great advantages of cloud computing. Lastly, resources are elastic. This means they can be rapidly scaled up and down based on the demands of your business. And if you're a seasonal service provider, such as retailers, you can imagine that around the holidays, the demand increases. And so you can easily scale up all your resources. And then after the big spike in business volumes, companies can go ahead and reduce the number of resources and therefore reduce their expenses. So why are businesses moving to the cloud? Well, it's because of the variety of advantages offered by cloud computing versus traditional on-prem computing. The first of these are agility. The ability, and we spoke about this briefly, but the companies can quickly scale resources up and down based on demands. This gives them a competitive advantage. Faster time to market is also a big draw from a cloud computing perspective. Need to add machine learning or data analytics? Those can be done much more quickly now than they could have been on-prem. The cloud also helps companies increase their efficiency of their IT department. Instead of hiring, let's say, network engineers, storage engineers, server admins, those are basically positions, more or less, that are keeping the lights on for a company. Those positions do not increase the competitive advantage of a company. So when companies don't have to focus on that, because in this instance they're given that responsibility to AWS, they can take those resources that would have been keeping the lights on and instead hire developers or hire other individuals that will help put the company at a better competitive advantage. The old paradigm of buying hardware and replacing it every 5 years and the disruption and delays that that can cause just is not competitive enough in this business climate. And so this is a reason why companies are moving to the cloud. There are a wide variety of services offered by AWS, but I want to talk about three of the most basic services. The first is Elastic Compute Cloud, or EC2. These are virtual servers. The second is Simple Storage Service, also known as S3. And if you need to store files, data, or backups, S3 is the service you want to use. Now, your virtual servers are going to have to live within a virtual network. And to create that virtual network, you're going to work with AWS's Virtual Private Cloud, also known as VPC. When companies ran all of their services out of their corporate data center, that was often located where the company's headquarters was located. And there's no guarantee that your customers are close to your company headquarters. And so one of the great advantages of the cloud is that it is global. Today, AWS is available in 30 regions throughout the world, almost guaranteeing you that you can put your compute services, your applications close to your customers. So you may be thinking, cloud computing sounds great, but how do I access AWS? Well, the first method, which is a very common method, is through the AWS portal. And this is simply aws.amazon.com. Another option, if you don't want to go through the graphical web browser portal, then you can go through a command line. And many individuals, if you grew up on Linux, are just very comfortable running commands through the command line as opposed to a point and click through the portal. So AWS gives you command line access to all of the AWS services. And sometimes you want a programmatic interface, and for those needs, AWS provides a rich set of API endpoints that gives you access to all of their services. So whether you're using Python, .NET, or using third-party tools like Terraform that take advantage of the API, this is the third method for accessing AWS services. There are three different cloud service models for companies that want to leverage cloud computing. The first is infrastructure as a service. And this is basically where AWS or other cloud providers are giving you access to the network, to storage, to servers. Then you as a customer, you're responsible for the operating systems and all the applications. Now, keep in mind, this means you have to patch those operating systems. Amazon's not helping you do that. You're going to have to patch things just like you did on-prem. But the good news here is that they are handling all the networking, all the hardware, the data center needs, the fire protection, access to appropriate power, etc. Next is platform as a service. Platform as a service, also known as PaaS, is where the cloud provider, in this case AWS, is responsible for the operating system patching. So this is great for companies who sometimes have challenges, always remediating vulnerabilities, always patching their operating systems on a regular basis. It's nice when you have hundreds or maybe thousands of servers to leverage platform as a service so that AWS is responsible for patching and managing the operating system, and you're more focused on the applications. The third service model is software as a service. And some examples of software as a service where as a customer, you are just basically renting access to the application. You're not worried about hardware, software, operating systems, backups. You just want access to the application. And examples of this are if you use Gmail, Microsoft's O365, Netflix, Dropbox, or Box, that's software as a service. In terms of how companies leverage cloud computing, there's three different deployment models. The first is known as private cloud. Now, to me, this isn't truly a cloud. It doesn't have the characteristics that we talked about with cloud computing, but you have to keep in mind that the technology industry is always full of very generic buzzwords that are hyped a lot. And so private cloud really is traditional data centers, but with a more modern terminology of private cloud. The term public cloud references the environments offered by companies such as AWS, Azure, or Google's GCP platform. And then hybrid cloud, as you might have guessed, is really the combination. And this is very common today, where a company doesn't abandon running everything in their on-prem data centers or co-location facilities. Sometimes companies have very valid reasons for keeping some workloads close to them in a data center, or perhaps that equipment is still good and they don't want to abandon it. But they use a combination of both private cloud and public cloud, sometimes having workloads in one or both of those environments. So why should you care about the cloud in AWS? Why should you learn and take the energy and the time to do so? Well, one is to consider the employer demand for cloud computing. I work with cloud technologies on a day-to-day basis. We have a lot of customers always looking to have us help them find cloud resources. And so take a look at this graph. This is from Duke University, granted about a year and a half ago, but trust me when I say that even in 2023, there's a great demand for cloud architects and cloud engineers. This next chart shows where Duke compared all the job postings and how often companies were looking for cloud skills versus how many candidates had those cloud skills. And you can see there in the first set of columns for Amazon Web Services, there was a wide gap discovered. When Duke analyzed the top 10 in-demand skills, Amazon Web Services, aka AWS, was number one. So I think these charts kind of illustrate why there's so many people interested in learning the cloud today. So if you're watching this video because you want to learn AWS or you're considering it, the logical question is, great. So what are my options? How do I learn AWS? And I'm going to talk about three options, although there are many. The first is you want hands-on experience, and one way to get hands-on experience is to leverage the AWS free tier. Now this is going to require a credit card, but as long as you use the services that are free, you don't have to worry about any expenses. And I'll put a link in the comments below so that you can watch my video on how to leverage the free tier and how to be careful to make sure that you're not charged. Now, if you want hands-on access to AWS, but you prefer not to use a credit card, I would point you to AWS Educate, and again, I'll have a link to this in the comments, but AWS Educate used to require a .edu email address. It no longer does. It just takes an email address, and as long as you're of the age requirements, which I think is 13 in most countries, you have access to AWS Educate, as I show here. 50 self-paced courses, 10 different labs. So this is a great way to get hands-on experience without requiring a credit card. The third method from AWS I'll mention is Skill Builder. Now, believe it or not, there are over 500 courses. This is all free. I do put a note here, if you want hands-on labs to follow along with, or you want to take certification practice tests, those are extra. I believe last time I checked, around $29.95 a month, but Skill Builder is free and a great way for you to enhance your AWS skills. So in summary, I'll say there are a lot of great opportunities for those of you willing to dedicate yourselves to learning AWS. Take the time to reinvent yourself. You'll be grateful you did. One of the best things I did in my career was to learn the cloud. I've been learning for the last 7 or 8 years about cloud technologies. Cloud technologies are going to continue to grow, so it's never too late to learn.